Hello, everyone. My name is Tara McGowan, and I'm delighted to share with you today a story I created about my childhood growing up in northern Vermont. As you can see from this map, Vermont is in red, and it's very close to Canada. This is where I grew up. So, Vermont is famous for its autumn leaves, its maple syrup, and for heavy snowfall in the wintertime. Here the story begins. Hamishibai no hajimari, hajimari. A child trapped within. Written and illustrated by Tara McGowan. Mukashi, mukashi. A long, long time ago, when I was in second grade, I had to go to public school for the first time. Before that, I had been homeschooled on a big farm with lots of animals, and I knew my teachers my whole life. They were my parents and my parents' friends. But starting today, I would have teachers I had never met before, complete strangers. I was so anxious. In the morning, we had Mrs. Presbury. Mrs. Presbury was young and beautiful and always had a kind word for us. We thought of her like a fairy princess. But in the afternoon, it was a different story. For math class, we had to go to Mrs. Cummings' room. One more word out of you, young lady, and you're going to have to put your head down for the rest of the afternoon. Mrs. Cummings was the strictest, meanest old witch I'd ever met. Whatever I did, every day it seemed I spent in total darkness in Mrs. Cummings' room with my head down on the table. After what seemed like hours, I would finally hear a sweet voice say, "Tara, is that you with your head down again?" And I would look up, and there was Mrs. Presbury. "Come on, it's time to come back to my classroom. Why don't you help me clean up the art supplies?" And I would jump up and follow Mrs. Presbury back to her room. Why couldn't all teachers be like Mrs. Presbury? In Vermont, when I was growing up, there was a lot of snow every winter. And the snow would pile high, as you can see, on the swing sets and on the slippery slide. We were not allowed to go on the playground at all during the winter time because of the ice and snow. But that didn't bother us because as soon as the snow plows came, we had mountains of snow to play with. We would have snowball fights and sledding races. We would build snow sculpture, and best of all, we would make tunnels through the snow that we could slide through. I loved tunneling through the snow, but always I was a little nervous. What if I got trapped inside? One day, it was so cold that we were all forced to stay inside. We were all sitting at our desks quietly reading when Casey Lemieux called from the window, "Hey, everyone, there's someone on the slippery slide. Come look." We all ran to the window. "I bet it's your brother. I bet it's your older sister. Boy, are they in trouble." Sure enough, there was someone climbing up the steps of the slippery slide, and it was definitely not a second grader. But we couldn't figure out who it was. They climbed higher and higher, and even as they got to the top, they had a big hat and coat and mittens and boots. We couldn't see who it was until they sat down on the very top of the slide. It was Mrs. Cummings! We couldn't believe our eyes. Stunned to silence, we all stared as she slid down the slippery slide, and we could see that she didn't fall well at the bottom. Suddenly we heard a voice say, "Boys and girls, quickly back to your desks. I'll be back in a moment." And Mrs. Presbury rushed out of the room. It was several weeks before we saw Mrs. Cummings again. And when we did, she had a big cast on her leg. She had to sit at her desk with her foot raised up on a chair and a pillow. This would have been the perfect time to get away with all kinds of pranks. but we didn't. I think because we finally understood that Mrs. Cummings wanted to play. She'd just forgotten how. Even now, all these years later, when I see someone who's strict and mean and angry all the time, like Mrs. Cummings, I think to myself, maybe, just like Mrs. Cummings, they might have a child trapped within, a little girl who loved to sled and play with snow and go down the slippery slide. And maybe if Mrs. Cummings had let that little girl out more often, we might all have been good friends. Oh, she might, the end. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my story. If you haven't already, I hope you will join me and my colleagues, Donna Tamaki of Kamishibai for Kids and Walter Ritter of Write Out Loud for the World Kamishibai Forum. Thank you.